What can I say after all of that? I need my chat to tell me, are we 5-5 tonight? I hope so. I hope we are coming in loud and clear because this is going to be an epic episode. Actually, an epic block of episodes. It has been my wonderful good fortune to get a hold of someone I have wanted to talk to for so long. And it's really unfair to him because I've been listening to him for years and he just met me a few weeks ago. But our phone conversations have been absolutely wonderful. And we are going to make up for some lost time tonight, tomorrow night, and next weekend for a wonderful Q&A with our wonderful guest tonight, and that was his idea, and it's going to be wonderful. So tonight we have a couple of things I have to get out of the way really quick. Tonight's episode will contain some graphic language and adult themes. Discretion is advised. Now, if that doesn't scare you away, I suggest you get a comfy chair and something nice and a nice cuppa and whatever beverage you choose, and relax and get real close to the screen. Tonight, we're not worried about ruining our eyes. You're not going to want to miss a thing. I have my wonderful co-host with me tonight, and I can't imagine ever taking this ride without him, Mr. Steve Stockton. Come on in here, love.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Sound wonderful. You
I'm
look
having
beautiful.
an issue. I thank you.
You
I
look beautiful.
owe that to Midnight Society. She picked my clothes out for me tonight. I love you,
Did
sweetheart.
she lay them out on the bed? You got your shoes on. You are wearing pants. We're
Yep.
good. All right.
The last time I
Fantastic.
checked.
Well, let's
Yeah,
dive in,
but
Steve.
this is an exciting evening. This is going to be one for the books.
This is amazing.
The
Now,
start of an exciting evening.
oh my gosh, yeah.
It's going to be three, four.
Right. Tonight, we're gonna basically we're giving Mr. Epperly the floor. I told him he is to lead this dance and he is to go do whatever step he wants. We're gonna waltz. I bet you we're gonna do a tango. We might even do a Texas two-step in
And
there.
you folks, if you know me and Cisco, you know what a challenge that is for us to sit here literally and not speak.
And just
So
yeah, and
we're going
just
to rise
try
to the challenge, and
to absorb.
this is going to be great.
The thing about this
Hi,
case,
everybody.
I won't go on, but it's whether you're into criminology or paranormal or supernatural or whatever. Now, we're not going over for our listeners tonight. We're not doing the paranormal till next, the fourth night. Steve and I are going to come in and go in behind this. What we are doing tonight is Mr. Epley is going to take us back to 1912, and we're going to go through not only the crime but the aftermath and the human condition and everything else. That, it's not just it's like the pebble in the pond that sent
Yeah,
ripples for decades.
way
And
back.
so
When
that
Branson was
being
a little
said,
boy.
we have two mods that are moderating all our questions. So if you're going to ask a question tonight, we may not get to it, but it will not be lost because Susan Woodcarver and a couple of our mods are going to be taking those questions down, documenting them, and we are re-pulling them up for, yep, that's her good stuff. She's a wonderful
Susan
artist.
Wood Carver's.
We are going to be bringing that up on the Q&A. That's also Dr. Epperly's favorite part, is when you guys get to ask questions. We also want you to think about, if you knew about this case beforehand, think now where you stand. Do you have an idea who might have did it? No, we have gone
Yeah,
over
and
all.
I was going to go and read up and catch up
Mhm.
on everything. And I thought, no, I want to
Yeah.
come into it knowing as little as possible because
Mhm.
this is the expert on this case.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we're going to do is, we're not ignoring your questions. They are being taken down. We're going to get to those next Sunday night. And that gives you a week in between, because tonight we're promoting the book and the movie that you saw in the intro there, that VilliscaMovie.com and VilliscaBook.com. This is Dr. Epperly's book. So without further ado, I do have a little intro written here, and we're going to bring Dr. Epperly in. But please, again, remember all your questions in caps for Susan so she can find them, as she is stating here in the live chat. And I'm also going to let him know how many of us are out there from around the globe. I know one of the things that he enjoys doing is going from library all around Iowa. He has been just amazing at getting out there and getting the word out about this whole incident. So it's really going to be a treat when we can come in with those good questions at the end of it all, after we've thought about it. How will those questions change? Did your question get answered along the way? And now you might have a whole different question, a little bit deeper, or you want to go off into this way or that way, because this case spider webs into many different directions. So it'd be interesting to see how your thoughts and your theories change along the way, and how your questions change along the way. So without further ado, Steve, let's kick this mule. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Sounds wonderful. I'm so excited. So sometime after midnight, June 10th, 1912, a vicious murder of a sleeping family and their young guests was committed. When the sun rose on the small bustling town of Villisca, Iowa, its citizens began a journey of extreme emotions, of disbelief, fear, anger, jealousy, and the rumors ran rampant. And that would last for decades. One man's journey, he would set out, and it would cover decades. Over 60 years of poring over historical documents, interviewing key people, and sorting the changes in the human condition of the citizens of Villisca, Iowa. Please welcome retired professor of education at Luther College, historian, and author of Fiend Incarnate, the Villisca Axe Murders of 1912, Dr. Ed Epperly. Please welcome in. Hello, love.
Hello there. Glad to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. It is an absolute honor. Can you hear us okay? You sound beautiful. You look beautiful. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
It's
Welcome, Doctor.
Absolute pleasure to meet you. This is Steve Stockton. He's the Tennessee good old boy I told you about, that is so into nostalgia and history. And we're also interested in this case, Dr. Epperly, but I'd love it if you'd take us back to what sparked you and when you got started, if you like.
Okay. Well, I grew up about 100 miles from Villisca, a little bit east and a little bit south. And I'd heard of it as a child. My dad had brothers in our community, small town, about the size of Villisca, actually. And I and this man, Don Brown, we went to Iowa State Teachers College, Cedar Falls. It's currently Northern Iowa University, but at that time it was Iowa State Teachers. And we and another, there were three of us from that little town, went together. And we wanted to teach history, all three of us, and majored in history. And in our senior year, that was 1956, we went to Villisca because we had gotten permission to do a research paper that involved real research rather than library research, where we wouldn't look just at books, but we would look at the scene, take some photographs, interview people, read some newspapers, those kinds of things. And we went there and spent a kind of an extended weekend. And mainly the thing we gained out of it, I think we got a feel for the event and just the nature of the place. Villisca is a town of about 2,000 at the time. It has lost population, as most Iowa small towns have, but it was about 2,000 then. And we managed to interview the first doctor on the scene. We interviewed the prosecuting attorney and the only trials that were conducted for the murderer himself. We interviewed a sister of the murdered girls that were visiting that night. Went back, wrote her a paper. The one fellow, he went on to higher and better things, got involved in other topics. But Don and I stayed with it for about 20 years, maybe not quite that long. And then Don left the state. He went to Indiana and consequently, I just continued on my own. It really at first was kind of a hobby. I would work on it and then I'd put it up, and whenever business or family intervened, it would sit in the file cabinet for a while. During that time, we got possession of the axe. A lot of people ask about that, the murder weapon. Um, I was reading an article in the Des Moines Register, and it said the axe, it had a photograph of a guy standing there holding the axe.
Mhm.
And his name was Risden, James Risden. He was the head of the Iowa Bureau of Criminal Investigation at the time. The article was in 1945. I was reading it I think I was reading it in 64, I believe. It's about 20 years later. And he said the axe was in his possession. And so I called Don, who was living in Des Moines, as he was living in Des Moines. And I said, give them a call. Let's see if they're still there, if they have the axe. And he called and got an elderly lady who said, yes, that was my husband, but he's dead now.
Mhm.
And so Don asked her, do you still have the axe? And she said, oh, yes, it's upstairs. Horrid thing. She said, we said, well, would you sell it? And she said, oh, I'd give it away. It gives me the willies. And so Don went down and offered her money, but she gave him the axe. And it has quite a good pedigree.
Wow.
It matches the dimensions that they were in some of the trial documents as to how much it weighed and how long it was, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it has some distinctive markings. If this photograph brought it up far enough, you can see there's a chip on the end of it and so on that match the pictures that were taken at the time of the murder. And then it has in India ink on the handle exhibit numbers and the initials of the court reporter who was conducting that during that trial for
Wow.
Kelly. None of these, for your listeners that don't know anything about the murder, we'll get to that in a moment.
Mhm.
But some of these names I throw out don't mean anything to you now, but they'll mean something.
They will. They will, right, hon?
I'm hoping they do.
Yeah.
Anyway, she gave him the axe. And after about a week, Don got thinking about it. So he took a notary public with him and went down to get it notarized that it was. So we have also her notarized statement that it was the Villisca murder axe.
Wow.
At that time, since she wouldn't take any money, he gave her a box of chocolate covered cherries.
Isn't that amazing?
That became the official price of that axe because he had it for nearly 20 years, and he had a little bookstore in Leon, Iowa, and that's a small town, 60 or 70 miles south of Des Moines, just across the Missouri line, about 10 miles. And when he left the state, he gave me the axe, and so from about 1975 to 2004, I had the axe in my possession. I never felt I owned it. I thought my idea was to eventually give it to a museum, but I didn't know where, and it was kind of fun to have it around and so on. But some people over the years have asked me, well, it got blood stains on it. Well, it had blood on it, but it's been handled and cleaned a lot in 100
Imagine.
years, and consequently it does not, I don't believe.
Thank you, sweetie.
But I said if it did, I
You're
would.
throwing money at us.
Oh, well, that's good.
Isn't that wonderful?
I'm happy for you. I said it's more likely that it has gravy stains because I was in this town for 50 years teaching at Luther, and we would have a dinner party at night, and we'd have 6 friends over and sit around talking. And every time it would come up, someone would say, "Do you really have that axe?"
Yep.
And I, "Sure, it's upstairs. You want to see it?"
Can you imagine?
So I would bring the axe down. And the second thing then they wanted to do was to handle it. They want to hold it. So it went around the table. And that's why I said I suspect it would have gravy stains.
Gravy all over it.
Now,
Can
Well,
you imagine though, just the, and to be able to get that, and then basically the whole reason you got it was to hold it for posterity and give it to a museum and have it to where people can, to keep it,
sure.
get a hold of it. Yeah.
I didn't have any, uh, any suspicion that it was, quote, worth money. I never planned to sell it,
Right.
nor did I feel that it would provide any information that would lead to the killer. Some people now were all excited about DNA and things of that nature.
True.
But it would be hard to disentangle the dozens, if not hundreds, of people who have handled the axe over the years. And so I doubt very much that it would ever be a useful instrument. It really, though, is only one of two artifacts from the murder directly that have been saved. The house is the large
Right.
artifact, and we'll talk about that some later, and the axe. But people ask about whether or not there were clothes and things like that collected. None of that was saved. The clothes that the victims were wearing, the night clothes, those were actually burned. They were bloody, and on Thursday after the murder on Sunday night, Monday morning, they were taken out to the local burning dump and burned, along with all of the bedding in the house. Then the house was fumigated and repainted and repapered, and finally it was rented. Oh, I suppose a year and a half after the murder, before they could rent it, people were leery of renting it. But finally, they got a fellow who came to town, and his family from Montana, and he was going to work for the city. And they rented it to him for, I think they rented it to him for $8 a month. And it shows you something about the cost of living in 1912.
Amazing, right?
Yeah. And then it got sold in 1915 to private individuals and remained in private hands until the 1990s, when it was purchased and has been opened as a museum. It was restored to 1912 condition. They took the plumbing out and they took the lighting out and took the siding off, returned it that way. But unless you have further questions, let me turn to the murder itself.
Absolutely.
This is a big, long, complex event, and even though I've got a lot of time, I'll bet you I'll be running out of time if I don't keep pressing on.
You like I said, you are leading this dance. But before you go on, I wanted to tell everybody about the book. One more, this is your book.
I'm always happy with that.
This is the definitive as far as I'm concerned. You can get this. It's the villiscabook.com. Now, when you go there, you can also, Dr. Epperly has a blog that just, Substack, this, would just be shocked, because this blog, everything you want to know about this case, detailed information about certain citizens and key people within this case and people that came along after. It's an amazing amount of information. It's a work of a lifetime. Please go there and either get the ebook, order the physical copy. You can also rent or order the DVD on the movie, and the movie this is it, Villisca Living with a Mystery. It is done by the Rundles. That's them here, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And this is the companion to the movie. Ed's book is the companion to the movie. He was a consultant on the movie. And I'm telling you that if you want to understand this case and the human condition and how a town can be split in two for decades, this is it right here. It's an amazing body of work. Ed, it really is. You should be very proud.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is Luther College. I wanted to show that. Now, you were here for...
I came there in 1969, and
Okay.
I retired in 2000. So they're 31 years.
All right.
Steve, apparently, you said was from Tennessee. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's correct. I had my mic muted so I could listen to you. Yeah, from East Tennessee, Knoxville.
Knoxville. Yeah. Well, my wife and I both got our graduate degrees from George Peabody College in Nashville.
Okay.
We spent 3 years in Nashville, and every time we had a vacation, we went to East Tennessee. It's beautiful country.
Went to the Smoky Mountains, didn't you?
We went to the Smokies. Yes, we did. On a time or two, we went across over into North Carolina, Asheville, and that area. But we really enjoyed those years in Tennessee. Let me get to we're looking at the Monday morning, the 10th of June, 1912. Villisca is in far southwest Iowa. It's about 60 miles probably from Council Bluffs, Omaha, and maybe 25 miles from the Missouri line in southwest Iowa. Town of about 2,000 at the time. There's a photograph on your screen of about that time. And this was a little earlier. They had a few cars in 1912, but not very many. And Mary Peckham was an elderly woman. She was ill. She was 63, I guess. And her house was one house. She was the next house from the Moore house, which is pictured on the screen also. It's to the west. Mary Peckham was doing the Monday morning wash.
This is not her actual laundry, by the way. This is just a mock-up. Just saying.
I don't have any of her laundry.
We don't have her drawers hanging on the line.
No, I don't. I'm sorry about that, but
okay.
There's still more to be done.
There we go.
Anyway, as she did her laundry, she was facing the Moore house, and she said later there was a terrible stillness about the house. Nobody was outside the house. Nobody had gone to the privy. Nobody was playing in the yard. Joe himself hadn't left for work yet. She couldn't see any movement or hear any sounds. And so she got worried. She wondered what's going on and walked across. It's only about 30 feet, not much more than that, down a little incline. And she knocked on the back door. Nobody responded. She tried to look into one of the west windows, but the shade was pulled completely to the sill and she couldn't see in. So she went and knocked on the front door, got no response. So she called Ross Moore, who was Joe Moore's brother. Joe was an implement dealer in Villisca, and Ross had a drugstore downtown. They both had grown up in the vicinity on a farm. They had 15 children in the family, 4 of whom died in infancy, but 11 had reached adulthood and were living at the time of the murder. But she also called Joe's implement dealership to find out if he had shown up for work. No, he hadn't gotten there yet. So a man named Ed Selly, who was a clerk, came down and he fed the animals in the little barn they had behind the house. And he didn't milk a cow. He said, well, I'll send down a lesser employee to do that. But anyway, he then left, and Ross Moore got there by that time. And Ross had a skeleton key, just by chance, that opened the door. There are 2 doors on the porch of the Moore house. One opens to the north and one to the west. And he went in the west door, which put him in the front parlor. He said it was very dark. He walked across the parlor and pushed open the door into the little room on the northwest corner, which was kind of a guest bedroom, although it's also a sewing room, I think, for Mrs. Moore. Mm-hmm. And he looked in, and there were 2 figures lying in bed. They were covered up. The bed clothing had been pulled over them completely. And he could see blood on the bedstead behind them, and he knew this has got to be something seriously wrong. And he came out. He didn't go any further in the house or into that room. and told Mrs. Peckham to call Ed Selly, who had already been there but was now back at work, and tell him to get Marshal Horton. Hank Horton was the day marshal in Villisca. And so Hank came out of the city hall up on the square. Villisca has a town square, but not a courthouse. It's not a county seat town. Red Oak is the county seat of Montgomery County. But when Hank came out, he said, I saw Ed Selly coming up the street from the east. And he said that it looked like he was like to running. So I knew something serious was wrong. I said, what's the trouble, Ed? And he said, well, something's wrong at Joe Moore's house. They want you down there. And so the two of them went there. He asked Rossmore, what's going on? And he said, well, I think something terrible's happened. I want you to go through the house and see what's wrong. And so he went in. He said it was dark as night. I couldn't see a thing. I took a match. I suspect in that day he either snapped it with his thumb or he struck it on his trouser. But he lit a match and let himself across that parlor and went into the bedroom.
Not to interrupt you, I'm going to try to do that so little, but this was one of those times that really got the hair on my arms up, because if you can imagine walking through that tiny house up that narrow staircase with a match just shining on the horror that was unfolding to him, it really got to me. I'm thinking, man, that was just awful. I mean, everybody that touched this was forever changed, I believe, Ed.
Oh, I think that's true. Mm-hmm. Certainly the town was completely changed. Mm. But he went across the room, pushed open the door, and he also then went into the room and lifted the blind on the north window. All of the blinds in the house had been pulled down to the sill, not just pulled down like we often do and leave an inch or two at the bottom, but they were clear down. In that room, there were two victims lying in bed. There was blood at the head of the bed. One of the characteristics of the murder was that all of the killing happened in the beds. Mm-hmm. No one, there are rumors that people ran from room to room, or some of the children hid in the closets and were drug out. And that's just speculation. And the reason I'm pretty confident about that is because there were no blood trails that were left throughout the house. The blood was all concentrated at the heads of the bed and the pillows and mattress and the bedstead behind them. Mm. But he pulled back the covers and they both had face cloths over them. They were lying on their back, and the face cloths were articles of clothing that had been taken and put over their face after they had been killed. And then the covers pulled over them. There was a lyre-back dresser on the east wall of that room. The lyre part had been covered, the mirror, here's a picture.
I got it.
Covered with a piece of cloth. I don't know where it came from. It just appeared.
I tried for you, Ed. I tried.
You got the good ones. This is the only picture,
the only one
that was actually taken in the house at the time of the murder. It wasn't taken on the day of the murder, I don't think, but it was taken within a day or so. Anyway, it looks to me like, and everyone make their own judgment, that it was rather casually thrown over the mirror. He left a large portion here and a large portion at the bottom. He wanted, it looks to me like, to blot out the center of the mirror, and it was a kind of a throw over and leave it go. This is a closet that was in that room. It isn't really a closet. It doesn't have a door. It has a piece of cloth that was suspended on it. You can see it's quite crowded, and it's really under the stairs. The stairs are going up like this, and that closet is the space under, and they covered up to get some more storage room and things like that. Um, there was a lamp at the foot of the bed, and the chimney had been removed. The chimney wasn't found until later in the morning, and it had been rolled under the. Here's the lamp. This is the original lamp. This is a heart design at the bottom.
Right. You can see that heart design very at the base.
This picture of the axe, this was taken not in the house necessarily. I don't know where it was taken. I think it might have been taken in a studio. It looks to me like a studio backdrop, perhaps, that they were using. They had a photographic studio in Villisca. But this chimney had been removed and was under the dresser. The murder weapon itself was leaning against the south wall. The bed ran north and south. The person on the west or left side of the bed as you came in was obviously a child. They couldn't identify her. She was mutilated by the axe. Not that she'd been struck several times, but they're small and the axe is big, and the blow did terrible damage to her head. All of the blows in the murder were from the chin up. There was no other blow struck. I made a little note before we started of some of the controversies that currently swirl around. People say, well, I heard this happen, and no, I heard that. One of them is that the other victim, who was on the right side of the bed, they couldn't decide if she was a woman or an older child, but she was not a young child. Actually, she was 12, but she was, as her mother said, near full grown.
She's a big girl. She really was.
She was a big girl, and he didn't recognize either of them. Beside the axe sat a 4-pound piece of slab bacon that had been wrapped in, some said a cheesecloth, others said a dish towel. I have no way of sorting that out, but it was wrapped. One doctor who was early on the scene, he said it was not wrapped, but all the other doctors said it was. My recreation of the scene really comes from 5 doctors who went through the house and looked at the scene, and Hank Horton, who was the town marshal. Those 6 people, at least 3 of them, got there before anybody else was on the scene. So the scene was not disturbed from them. They got there. And they wrote and gave some rather extensive testimony under oath in the various investigations that took place. And I always felt that they were the best source of what the scene actually looked like.
Yeah.
Now, the axe had been cleaned. The killer had taken a piece of cloth and wiped it off and thrown the cloth under the bed. But there was still some blood and hair that adhered to the axe. So there's not any question it was the axe. And it was the Moore axe. Joe's had that axe in the backyard, in which he used it for mashing breaking up coal. He was burning Iowa coal, and it comes in great slabs. It's very low quality coal. There's no coal mined in Iowa now, but there was at that time. And if you bought it, you didn't have a furnace with a large enough door to put those slabs in. So you had to crush it into smaller pieces. And that's what he used that axe for. These were the 2 victims I've talked about so far, Ina and Lena Stillinger. They were, Ina's 8 and Lena's 11. Ina's going to be 9 in about a week, and Lena later that summer. So sometimes they're reported as being 9 and 12, but they weren't. Anyway, this, by the way, is the girl we interviewed, their older sister, Blanche.
Right there in the middle.
Yep. Yeah.
Mhm.
But that's neither here nor there. It doesn't matter. But this is a key figure and a crucial part in analyzing the motivation of the killer. She's the only victim that appears to have moved. The others all were struck and dead in their beds. She was found about a third of the way down in the bed. She had been pulled or slid about a third of the way down the bed. She was lying with her shoulders on the bed, but rotated at the hip. So she was lying on her right hip with her left leg drawn up. Her undergarments had been removed, and her nightgown was bunched up above her waist. And she was left at an angle so that the buttocks just was on the very edge of the bed, and it looked like she had been placed there for a sexual display.
Right.
And the lamp was on the floor just 2-3 feet below her, I think, to provide light, I think. Anyway, we'll get back to. It seems to me that I have a nurse in attendance in case. No,
God bless you, darling. God bless you. If you, like I said, if you need a tea or anything, you just go do it.
I'm doing fine. I just don't sound good tonight.
No, you sound wonderful.
Well,
but
anyway.
that's one of the things. Go ahead and take a second, because I wanted to say that this is one of the things. The reason we're doing this whole case is because, again, when there's a true crime, especially one that goes over the decades, facts tend to get warped and changed. You'll have a small little sentence in a newspaper somewhere, and somebody will run with it, and this is how rumors start.
Yep.
This is one of the ones about this young lady that she fought off because she had a cut on her arm. Dr. Epperly will tell you why we know that's not true. We don't believe she moved, and she certainly isn't running around the house like in some of these movies that are made.
Yeah.
We need to stick to the facts in this out of honor for the victims as well. It's horrible enough, I don't know why people add to it, because it's just bad enough. The truth is, and that's why we're doing this, right, Ed?
Sure. She let's just take that
Sure.
cut. She when she was found, she had blood on her arm. I'm not sure which one. I don't believe I've ever read that left arm, right arm, but there was blood on the arm, which most people, in fact, even some forensic people have claimed were defensive wounds, that she threw her arm up to protect herself just before the killer struck. I don't believe that's true. Well, I know that's not true because the local citizen who washed the bodies, the woman prepared the bodies, washed them before they were buried, and she said she did have blood on her arm, but when I washed it, it washed right off. There was no cut there. It was blood that had been splashed or she got on her arm.
And that puts that to bed. So if you see that, you'll know this part here is the fact, because it does make a difference.
That would be the countering argument, at least. And I think I put faith in the woman who made that statement had no reason not to tell the truth, I'm sure. But the other thing was, a lot of people thought that her being down the bed was an example of her sliding to duck the blow.
Right.
But that I don't think was true either, because one arm was over her head and lying, but it was on the pillow. The hand was on the pillow, and it was in a pool of blood.
Mm-hmm.
And had she slid down the bed to escape the blow, the blood would not have been on the pillow. It would have been down in the middle of the bed. So I'm pretty confident that she also had a mark on the inside of her thigh, just above the knee, which looks like either a bruise or blood. I think it was a blood spot. I don't have any information as Some said it was a bruise, some said it was a blood spot, and I never heard that clarified. But it looks like that the killer grabbed her by the legs at the knees and pulled her down.
Older. Mm-hmm.
That's how I interpreted it, at least. Well, then Hank Horton then started upstairs. And he said to Ed Sully, "Come on, Ed, let's go upstairs." And Ed said, and I sympathized with him. He said, "Not me. I ain't going." And I suppose he felt, I think, one of two things. One, either, I'm not getting paid enough as a hardware clerk to do this. It's not my job, and I don't want to see anymore. Or he wondered who killed these people. Could that person still be sitting upstairs waiting for us to come up those stairs? Either one was a possibility. And so he went outside and stood on the porch. The stair itself is a very narrow S-curve stair. You start in, you take a curve at the bottom, go up a straight stretch and curve to the west. That stairway, it had hooks with clothes hanging on the stairway. It was hard to negotiate that stairs. But anyway, the killer went up the stairs. He goes at the top step. He enters the room. It's the Joe and Sarah's bedroom directly. There is no doorway. The stairs is open directly into the room. And that bed runs east and west, just the reverse of downstairs. It's a gabled room, as you can see, and the bed they have this placed right. This was taken in 1916, 4 years after the murder, and it was it's a pose picture. It was arranged by a detective who came to town and was fighting to prove that a local citizen was behind it, and the state was investigating another person who was very short, 5'2".
Right.
And this picture was designed to demonstrate that a person that short could not reach the ceiling, because the killer, it looks like when he brought the axe back, not when he swung it, but when he brought the axe back, he hit the ceiling. These X's are supposed to show where he hit the ceiling, but I think that's contrived because the picture was taken much later. The house had been redecorated, and I'm not sure anybody knew where he hit the ceiling precisely.
Right.
But he did. He made a gouge in the ceiling above the bed. Joe was sleeping on the south side of the bed. It's going east and west, so that would be the left side as you come in the room. Sarah was sleeping beside him on the right side of the bed. Again, you can walk up both sides of that bed the way it was placed at the time. And they were the only ones that were purposely mutilated. The kids were killed, but it looks like they were given one axe blow and the killer went on. These the two adults, the parent figures, they were nearly erased. They're very viciously struck. Joe, there wasn't anything remaining from the chin to the back of the head. The face was gone. All of the some about back to the ears. I think the ears were still attached. She had been struck. The killing blow was on top of the head, and obviously she was dead as soon as she got hit that way. But it looks like then the killer left, and there was some time passed, and then he came back, and this severe mutilation took place at that time. I believe that there are two lines of argument to support that. All of this is supposition, reconstructing a scene. Nobody was there, and they didn't catch anyone. But She had been struck in the face, starting at about the chin, and in the words of one of the doctors, he said that her face had been reduced to approximately 1-inch slices up across the face.
Mm.
Now, it did not, she wasn't as deformed by that as you might expect. It's strange.
It's strange but crazy, right?
Well, the face still held together, so
Right.
to speak. But you could open it up like an accordion if you pulled on the chin. And there was no blood in those cuts.
Right.
So that implies, at least to me, I'm no medical person, but that implies to me that the heart action had stopped and
Post-mortem.
the blood had drained out of the face by gravity. She's lying on her back, so that would drain away. And therefore, there was no blood to be. A lot of people did not realize she had been struck by the blade because her face was distorted, but it wasn't bloody, and it wasn't clear what had happened. Joe, the other line of argument besides that was when Joe died, the blood ran across the pillow and dropped off the bed. And she had, Sarah had put her shoes under the bed. And one shoe had nearly filled with blood. But when it was found, it had been tipped over and was on its side, and blood had fallen on the shoe and on the sole. And that implied that, one, it had to have time to fill the shoe, and then the blood, though, had to still be running, dripping,
Right.
or it wouldn't have continued to drip on the shoe. So that if anybody, when they opened the house, if anybody tipped the shoe over at that time, there would have been no blood to drip on the shoe. So that happened at that time, but after there had been sufficient time to fill the shoe.
Right. Right.
I don't know if that's significant, but it's the only thing it's an attempt, at least on my part, to imagine what the killer did.
Right, right. Because he did spend a lot of time in the house.
Yes, he did.
He took time to cover all the windows. He pinned some of the covers to the windows.
Yes, that's
he
right.
haphazardly covered that mirror. And if I'm correct, do I recall that the mirror, one of the mirrors that was covered, would also have been in view if he was standing in front of Lena?
Yes.
At that time, and you
See,
and I were talking.
The mirror
about
is on the east wall.
Okay.
The bed is here. He is standing basically between the mirror and Ina or Lena. Maybe back this way a bit. The lamp is down here at the foot of the bed. I hope your listeners don't mind if I jump around a bit, but let me go back and pick that up a bit.
They're used to me. They can hang on to this crazy train. You just keep going. You're doing great.
When the way I explained it seems to me that, one, it could have been a perversion of funeral customs. At that time, Victorian in England, in the Jewish community in America at that time, there was many funerals were at home, and they oftentimes covered the mirror if there was a funeral or a body in the house, that kind of thing. You could make an argument that perhaps the killer, even though he was psychotic enough to do this, felt compelled to conform to some kind of ritual that was expected for a body in the house. That's not my favorite interpretation, but I recognize that you could make an argument for that. You could make an argument for superstition. There are lots and lots of superstitions about mirrors. And I sometimes, if I'm making a talk in the libraries, I'll point out maybe they're um, if you see yourself in a mirror at midnight, you'll see the devil. And
Mm.
you can try that out tonight if you want to. You can
Yeah,
find
I don't think I'm going to do it. I'm not doing it.
those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Those don't appeal to me personally much. They don't explain it to me. I think a better explanation would have been that he had a lamp on, so there's a flickering light in that room.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's spooky enough for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
But here he's killed 8 people, and now he wants to be looking at this girl, and his image is kind of a ghostly image in that mirror. And when he first glances, he might even, as he moves, it'll move, and to see a movement in the corner of your eye, he might have been frightened. Oh, something's here. And then he realized it was a mirror. And to avoid that, I think he just grabbed a skirt and threw it over the mirror with a minimum of care, because that would, while he was standing there looking at her, he was protected from that kind of ghostly image in the corner of his eye.
Right. We also have to think of his psychological pattern, what kind of a person would do this. That makes sense, and it goes along with that kind of psyche. He wanted his own fantasy rather than the reality of what he saw in the mirror.
Yeah,
basically.
And I think that
makes sense.
Yeah, that has something to do also with him covering the figures in bed, so that they are not visible to him. But that's a common thing for a serial killer, to cover the victims. There's an attempt to deny their being. They feel somehow they're not real people. They're just a lump that is in front of me, and so on. And it might be part of it. But I do think those 2 factors, the girl downstairs implying a sexual motive, and the badly mutilated adults upstairs, are in a sense conflicting explanations. I mean, there are people who would go into a house like that and kill everybody and mutilate certain ones, and that it was the killing itself that eased their rage, eased their anxiety, eased their tension, whatever it was motivating them. There are others that would focus on the sexual nature of the situation, and that's really why I've not been able to resolve in my own mind the killer. The killer's one of 2 people. One is the man they tried it for, because he had a long history of sexual aberration that was all visual, not he never
hands-on.
No, he was a window peeker, and we'll talk about that when we get there.
Right.
The other possibility is a serial killer, and that's a very viable possibility. And that serial killer would have been motivated more by the cathartic release of killing, the actual murder, and the obliterating of the adults was kind of a culmination of that murder. And the children may well have been killed not as an afterthought, but as a enabling act. If I kill the children, then I can do whatever I want to the adults, and so on. Well, anyway, Hank Orton then went into the south room. That's the children's room. They had 4 children. Herman was 12 and was lying in the northeast corner of that room on a cot. He was lying on his stomach. I think he was the only one who was, and was struck in the back of the head, obviously, and killed. Also covered with a face cloth, and then his head was covered, and then pulled the cover over him. In the southwest corner, Catherine, their only daughter, she was 10, and she was in a small bed of her own, And in the northwest corner was Boyd and Paul. Boyd is 7, Paul is 5. They were sharing a bed. These are children's-sized beds. They're not
Right,
full.
right.
The center part of the room was open. And it's kind of a sad touch, but there were stuffed toys and playthings lying strewn on the floor where they had left them. And they all been struck the same way, struck in the head. Catherine was kind of hit in the forehead, and the forehead had collapsed. So her lower face was not damaged in any way, but it was distorted. It had kind of collapsed because of the support. All of the supporting tissue was gone, and it sagged down. Herman got hit in the back of the head. I can't talk. I think Paul, the 5-year-old, his head just kind of exploded. It was so, the axe was so
He's
big.
just little.
Yeah, that's right. And it had terrible damage, but not much evidence that they were hit multiple times. Now the movie,
which is again throws out a lot of people, different books and movies and interviews and podcasts that have been done where they're saying that they were decapitated and everything else. They were only hit with the blunt end that we know of, except for Sarah.
Yeah.
And the overkill was on Joe and Sarah. And Ed and I have talked about this, and just like you guys are saying in the chat, a lot of the people, could we be dealing with someone who was abused as a child? The parents turned their back, maybe more angry at the mother because the father abused him. We could play with theories all day, but it matches. It matches, Ed, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. There were cuts in the ceiling of that room where the killer, when he swung the axe, he had hit the ceiling. But that was much different. The second day after the murder, on Tuesday after the murder, a man named McCloughery arrived. McCloughery was a deputy warden at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, which isn't very far from Villisca, by the way. He'd gotten there by train because he was a fingerprint expert. He had gone to Scotland Yards and learned fingerprinting, and had started a policy of fingerprinting all of the inmates as they came into Leavenworth. And his collection became the foundation for the FBI's fingerprint collection, which now numbers millions, I'm sure. It numbered thousands when he was there getting it started. He was a bona fide expert. There's no question about that. He's the only person who did anything that would approach a modern forensic analysis of the scene. Now, it was very limited by our current operations, but he was on the cutting edge of criminal investigation. He was also stumbling, staggering, falling down drunk when he got there. He got off the train and couldn't, I don't know if he could stand. They got him in a car and took him to a local hotel, and they spent 6 hours sobering him up.
Isn't that something?
When he then went to the scene finally, but he he did a pretty good job. He ended up wrote a report of something like 10, 12 pages, typewritten pages, which is in the Attorney General's papers in the state archives. But he measured the cuts and pointed out that none of those cuts were related to the victims. None of the swings of the axe would have hit any victim because the ceiling was higher in that room. And he would have, if he had been standing at the victim's bed, pulling the axe back, he wouldn't have hit the ceiling. Swinging it this way, he wouldn't hit the ceiling. And so his analysis, some people have disagreed with this, others supported, but he thought that the killer was in a frenzy of excitement and swinging the axe over his head one-handed like this. as he put it, Indian style, like a tomahawk.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, he hit the ceiling with the blade of the axe. And blood flew off the axe into a little closet in that upstairs bedroom, which he used to form a line to figure out exactly where it was going when it hit. And he calculated that the killer was left-handed. He was swinging the axe left-handed, at least. The murder, well, that's the Hank came downstairs after seeing that and went out on the porch, and Ross, he walked up to Ross Moore and said, "My God, Ross, there's somebody murdered in every bed."
Mm.
And that's the Villisca Axe murder, and that's the scene of it. Shortly thereafter, doctors started to arrive. The word got out, and there were 4 doctors in Villisca, and all of them came. 2 of them got there before anybody else did. Dr. Cooper was the first one on the scene. It's interesting how we talked about how this impacted their life. When we got there in 56, somebody said, well, Dr. Cooper was a doctor that looked at the victims, and his office is still open across the street. And so we went to that, actually, one of us did, and it was up a long stairway to a second floor in a downtown business.
Incredible.
Big room, that's all it was, a big room. And his desk was way back. He's sitting there with like I am, with a little lamp at the desk. And he said, well, what do you want, young man? And I said, well, I'd like to talk to you about the Villisca murder. He said, leave it alone. Forget it. Let it die. It's split this town for 40 years.
Yep.
I won't talk about it. And crestfallen, they said, well, if I thought you were the first doctor on the scene. Mm-hmm. Or excuse me, I thought you were on the scene as a doctor. And I was the first.
That's it. That's all it took.
So he talked for half an hour, 45 minutes. He couldn't help himself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we did find that a lot of people's first reactions were reluctant, but once they got involved, they weren't able to ignore the case. Well, anyway, the 2 doctors, that one of the things they did determine was they estimated that the killing had happened 7 or 8 hours after it was discovered, which would be somewhere around midnight. This was between 8:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and so that would push it back to around midnight. And they determined that rather casually by our standards, but they picked up a body and let it fall back on the bed. Mm-hmm. And that gave them a measure of the degree of rigor mortis that had set in. Mm-hmm. And so they, from that, estimated that. And also Dr. Cooper, he used the fact that the blood had a particular sheen to it. He said that the serum in the blood separates from the blood, and it gives it a shiny coat.
Yes.
And that takes in terms of hours to do that. And so he felt that also supported the fact that it had been several hours before the murder happened.
Right.
I think the general estimation was that it happened sometime between 12 and 1 o'clock, but it might have happened an hour later. I don't think it would have happened an hour earlier. But anyway, while they were there, townspeople started to arrive. The word spread very rapidly. They had telephones, of course, and hundreds of people gathered. Businesses, actually, the businesses were officially closed by the mayor about noon, and all businesses were locked up. But at first, people just locked their stores and came down. And there were the yard filled, and then people crowded up on the porch, as you can see in the corner of that picture. It got so full that when another person would climb up and get on the porch, it tended everybody would have to shift a bit and somebody would fall off the other side. It was just packed with people looking in the doorways and so on. And when Cooper came out, there were 2 or 3 men who were pretty obvious they were going to go in. And he said, don't go in there, boys. He said, you'll regret it for the longest day you live.
Right.
You don't want to see that. And they didn't pay any attention. The scene was being controlled by a young marshal, a night marshal named Overman. I think he was 26. And he did not have the gravitas to control. These were businessmen and bankers and people who did not feel they had to take orders from a 26-year-old, even if he was a policeman. So people started going through the house. Some people estimate a few, others say dozens, and many say 100 or more. And I would suspect that's true. I suspect that there were 100 people who did that. Some people said, well, that ruined the chance of solving it because they destroyed the evidence. But nobody in those days took what we consider evidence. There was no blood sampling. There was no collection of fiber and hair, body fluids, none of that. Blood typing wasn't even known yet. Right. And the idea that of DNA, that's 50, 60, 70 years in the future, so that nobody worried about that. The fingerprint expert, by the way, didn't find any fingerprints. I mean, he found all kinds, I'm sure, but none that could relate to the murder. And it looked to me like, from the way it was described, he had to have a print that, like if you put your hand in ink and then make a print. It had the idea of dusting an area and lifting a print out of the oils of the fingers. I think that was still in the future, or at least with him. I don't know that he did anything like that. The people who went through, though, did add to some of the confusion because they saw things and interpreted them. They saw the blood on the arm of Stillinger, and they interpreted that as a cut, which you could. And so I think that the basis of that particular rumor comes from that some of their talk. They go out in the street and said, well, it was awful, and they were all mutilated, and there's blood everywhere, and this one girl had a cut in her arm. He had missed and hit her arm, and things like that. And, I'm making this up, but that's how I suspect they said.
Well, that's how rumors start. Those little pieces all the way through this, all the way through up until now. And again, what happens now is that people take the easy route, or they think it's the truth, and they just play off of it, and then it grows. And,
that's right. And many of these, in podcasting or anything like that, you want the story to be, you want people to be caught by the story. It's too bad that they feel they have to make it worse.
Embellish it. Yeah, because the truth is horrifying enough.
No, I don't think so either.
Right.
But they went through the house. They did, a lamp was broken, or a chimney was broken in the house. They did some minor damage, but I don't think that there was any major problem from that.
And they just couldn't control them. I mean, like you said, one person would get on. There were so many people on the porch that one person would get on, 2 would have to fall off.
Right.
And, they go in the back, they'd come in the front. They had no training. And like you've said in many podcasts, there was no crime scene tape.
No.
Back then, they didn't know what to do. They got barbed wire, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Wire. I'm not sure it was barb, but it was wire. But what happened was that along about I don't know exact time, but 10:30, probably 10:30,
Mhm.
an hour after it had been opened, at least, I'm sure. George Whitmer, who was the sheriff of Page County, which
Mhm.
is the first county south. It's the last county before you get to Missouri. Uh, he got there and he saw the scene was out of control. And so he uh, deputized 8 or 10 men, and they formed a cordon around the house and pushed everybody back. When Lindquist, the county coroner, was there, he said, I was working downstairs and people were running from room to room and shouting. And I said to Overman, I said, my God, why don't you get these people out of here? He said, I can't do it. I push them out the front and they come around to the back. But Whitmer was a mature sheriff and knew what he was doing. And he cleared the yard. And then they brought wire and stretched around a kind of a self-created crime
Yeah.
scene tape. And the police, now after dinner, about 1 o'clock, they called out the National Guard. Villisca had a National Guard unit or a militia unit in those days. And they actually put guardsmen around the house. And later, when the funeral was held, the National Guard controlled the crowd and things like that.
Mhm.
One incident about it, there was a young man, a 21-year-old downtown, Bruce Stillinger. Bruce was son of a druggist, another druggist in town. Here's a picture of him about that time. And he was a active community guy, friendly guy, big fellow, tall, not heavy, but tall. This is Ross Moore. And Bruce was a stringer for the Omaha World Herald, which was a major newspaper in that area, which meant that whenever there was something like an event of interest in Villisca, he would get on the telephone and try to persuade them, you ought to run a story about this.
Mhm.
And he would maybe even write a story and send it, and they would either run it or modify it, whatever. And a reporter from the Omaha World Herald came right there. It's only 50, 60 miles, got on a train, would be there in an hour and a half probably. And so by mid-morning, he got there, and this was when people were still going through the house. And so he gave Bruce a little camera, small camera, probably a Kodak box camera, I suspect, because he was not a photographer. He was a reporter, and he probably just had a small unit. And Bruce went through and took photographs inside the house of the victims, and who knows what he took. Took a roll, at least, I suspect. And then he came out, and Ross Moore saw him on the yard. Ross is the brother of Joe. And Ross realized that he had taken pictures. And that was just infuriating to Ross. So they had a kind of a altercation in the front yard, at least a rooster fight. I think they kind of bumped each other, and they weren't swinging or anything. Ross was a mature man and a pretty burly guy, a little on the fat side, I suspect, but still, most people in those days were active and did a lot of walking and stuff. Pretty muscular guy. And in that scuffle, he got a hold of the camera and he threw it on the ground and then jumped on it and broke it open. So the film was exposed. And then he stalked off, and Stillinger picked up the camera and took it to the Omaha Reporter. And they tried to develop the film, but it had been exposed and it was too damaged.
That was the end of that.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't really blame Ross, though. That was his whole family, and
well, that's
you know?
essentially right. Sure,
Right.
And
Right.
Bruce, his son, by the way, became a real expert in the murder. Bruce Stillinger Jr.
He's in the movie, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's
Yeah.
was a major consultant in the movie, and he and I have crossed paths many times. He's dead now. He died. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Time gets away. Maybe he died 10 years ago. But he taught English at the University of Hawaii for years. And he worked on the murder for years, very thorough work. And he's a bit more organized than I am, for sure. He had papers that were filed. My papers are behind me and they're in stacks. But anyway, Ross, he could have written a fine book. I talked to him. I said, are you going to write a book? He said, well, I don't think so. And he never said why, but I think I know. He grew up in the town. He knew these people personally. Some of the people don't come out too well in what they did and what they didn't do. Others were very sensitive and didn't want to talk about it and tried to suppress it and all of that. And I think he was too close to it to write about it. I've been to Villisca a lot, but I wasn't that intimate in my connection with them as Ross was. I've spoken in Villisca several times over the years about the murder, and I usually try to give a kind of a dressed up version of it. I don't get into the great bloody details that we're doing tonight. But one time there's a local citizen who we'll talk about a little later who was accused by the murder, and many people still strongly believe he was behind it. He paid for it. He was a wealthy man. He did not, in my judgment, and I thought I had very strong evidence to show he couldn't possibly do that. And so I gave an hour speech, which was essentially a summation of why that case that they believed didn't hold water. And I felt pretty good about it. I was kind of happy. Everyone gave polite applause and left. As they were leaving, I walked out and walking behind these two guys, and one of them, I could hear one of them say, well, I don't care what he says. That son of a bitch Jones had something to do with it.
Still.
I hadn't made any gain at all.
It's amazing how it is. It's very much like a lot of times. Steve, please jump in here. I know we're trying to be quiet. We're just absorbing tonight, but this is a good spot for a lot of people that, have you on as, their podcast will tell you, you say that you're familiar a little bit with the JFK, but not, it's not something you really dug into. The reason they're doing that is this case and the JFK case is similar in the spider webbing of the misinformation that gets repeated and repeated and repeated, and then having to go back and, I knew Jim Mars, who for years and decades, like you, worked on the JFK case, and he says the same thing. I talked to him 3 days before he passed, and he said exactly the same thing. Every time I give a lecture, I'm walking out and somebody says, I don't know. I still think Oswald did it by himself, 2.5 hours evidence. And they're just like, they're going to think what they're going to think. And,
I'm still not convinced. Listen.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No. And, it's a fool's errand to try to persuade people. I mean, the people in Villisca heard this story literally at their mother's knee. I mean, they when they were 5 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old, somewhere along the line, the family talked about it and they heard about it. And if the family was convinced that Jones was behind it, that's what they learned. If the family was convinced that Jones had nothing to do with it, that's what they learned. Jones is the third suspect, really, but we won't get to him tonight. But
we're gonna hit those tomorrow night. So right now tonight, I want to go ahead and mention the movie again, if you don't mind, Ed.
Sure.
A lot of people are asking, because if you want to hear Ed speak on this, if you want to hear Ross speak on this, he does explain a lot of what Ed was talking about, his thoughts on it, the town, and of course you get to see a little bit of the town and everything else. But it's Villisca Living with a Mystery. I rented it. I wanted the quick thing to where you could get it for 3 days. I think it was like $5. It was very reasonable. You can buy the DVD. There's another one where it's got extras and lots of pictures and everything in it. Ed, his book, this one here, it's The Fiend Incarnate, Villisca Axe Murders of 1912. This is the definitive. This is what Ed has been working on for multiple decades and pulling it all together. And it is the companion for the movie. Get it at villiscabook.com, and the movie you can get at villiscamovie.com. Very simple. If you guys, mods, if you could drop those links off. Steve, what do you think so
I've got to
far?
ask, if I go to that website, can I get a signed copy, Dr. Epperly?
Certainly can.
Awesome.
Well, no. Let
No,
me.
okay.
I'm getting
wait a
mine
minute.
from
Now
you.
wait a minute.
You had me for a minute.
No. After we're through with this, you give me your address. I'll mail you one.
Oh, you don't have to do that, sir.
No. I've got packing here. I send out them all the time.
Well, at least let me
I
pay
definitely,
postage.
yeah, well, yeah, we'll definitely pay. That's the thing. I
We,
want
we can
one
talk. We can
that's
talk
been in
about
your
that
hands.
later.
We'll talk about it, but I
I'll
want
send
you
you some
guys.
of my books in return. How's that?
There you go.
Trade
Well,
with you.
sure, we'll do a trade. That'll be
We'll
fine.
do a trade.
Just
Yeah,
wondering.
everybody's got their books. There's ours.
I've got 5. Cisco
There's
and I've
mine and
done one
Steve's.
together.
I've got one, and there won't be
And
any
it's,
more.
but it's a heck of a, and we haven't even scratched the surface
I'll
because
send you
I
this
know
one.
we
It's
haven't
about,
got beyond the murder.
I know.
this is about the Great Smoky Mountains National Park mysteries.
Oh,
and
you
Oh,
mysteries.
that would be interesting.
I'll
Sure.
send you that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be great. I like that.
Steve and I have devoted our time now to keeping these stories alive and getting
Yeah.
to the facts. Now, I just as a couple of touches, Steve. Now we are going to have our big Q&A next Sunday. So every question you guys are putting in here for Susan to pick up, you're putting in capitals. I'm looking at them as they go by. Sorry about that. I guarantee as we listen to this, a lot of those questions will be answered. And I think they're going to change as we go through these different episodes as well. I love everything you're putting in there as far as, this is a kind
Just
of a next
all the
level chat,
details.
Ed.
It's mind-boggling.
It's
It's like
amazing.
Cisco said, it's a spider web. It goes out from here, and then each one of those little strands is connected by other little strands, and it's
Right.
all
And the
it's,
human
it's
condition,
almost incomprehensible. Yeah.
how people react to things and how people, the next thing they do, like, of course, Ross Moore went in there and saw the pictures and realized, process what had happened. He probably hadn't even had a good primal scream yet. I mean, this man walked in and saw his whole family, basically his nieces and nephews, 2 strangers dead in a horrible manner. My question, I'm, of course, very interested in the criminology of the whole thing and why someone would do this. And of course, I have my theories, but I wanted to ask you, the plaster that came off the ceiling in Joe and Sarah's room, was the plaster on top of the coverings that he had put on or under?
No, it was on top. The
Okay.
That's why we're sure that it was done by the
Mhm.
axe, because the powder, it came off as, plaster would fall as powder, and that was on the bedding on top of them. So they pulled it back, but it was clear that they were under the covers and struck in the head, then face cloth, pull up the covers, and so the plaster dust had fallen on the covers after after he had hit them, and then he hit the ceiling,
Right.
and so on. The weather was, I think the high on the day in a town, they didn't have a weather station in Villisca, but they did in a town 20 miles away, so it's essentially the same weather. And the high on Sunday, the day of the murder, was 68 degrees, which is pretty cool for June 10th in Iowa. Iowa is not a desert state by any means, but it gets pretty warm in the summer. And June is normally, you'd be a little warmer than that. And so at night, and it was cloudy, so at night it probably was in the lower 50s or upper 40s. So they've had covers, I'm sure.
But it further solidifies the idea of course, the blood in the shoe being tipped over, absolutely. And you and I had talked about where he took extra time. It seems to me that at least for a part of the crime, the parents were the focus on the anger, and maybe the young girl was the focus on the perversion of whatever reason
Mhm.
they were doing this. But definitely some kind of abused child of some sort to go back up there, because it's also where you thought that, or at least the theories have come through, where he was almost dancing in a frenzy of
Yeah,
excitement and
no,
elation.
And swinging the
Mhm.
yeah,
head.
yeah.
Wow.
That's a.
That's
I've
it.
I've always thought that the Villisca murder would make a tremendous Hollywood film if it were handled properly.
Me
Correctly.
too.
If they've stayed away from sensationalizing, they don't have to. But to see this figure in the dark of that room, uh, maybe holding the axe in one hand and the lamp in the other, I am not sure. That's been speculated.
Hmm.
Um,
What
and
about the
then
closet, Ed? What you when you just say what you wanted to say, but I don't want to forget the closet before we go tonight, because it's so
yeah,
important.
well, I've got
Right.
that right. I've got that right here.
You go right ahead, love.
I've got a series of half a dozen questions of disagreements about the scene. I've covered the scene uh, already. It's taken a long
Hmm.
time, but I've done it. And I want to say something about the kind of controversies that have come
Okay.
up, and you hear a lot. Uh, one I'm asked a lot, and I don't have an answer for. I have an opinion, but not an answer. And that was, how could the killer do it? I mean, how could he move through the house without awakening everybody? And
Hmm.
that ties into the controversy over the closets, because the answer that a lot of people have given is perhaps he entered the house while they were away for church and hid in a closet. There are there's some thought he might have hidden in a little closet under the stairs downstairs. I don't believe that's true, but it was just packed with stuff, and it had just a cloth covering. It'd be terribly dangerous for him to do it. A few people thought he hid behind the piano. They had a piano in
Hmm.
the living room, the front parlor, and they had it at it isn't there, and now it's there. They've got a piano there, but they have it against a wall. But from what
Okay.
I have been, my research suggests it was across the corner, kind of like a corner cabinet.
Okay.
I suppose it's more decorative to have
Makes
it
sense.
sitting like that, which meant there was a space behind it.
Hmm.
And some people thought that the killer had clambered in over the piano somehow and was crouching behind the piano until everybody went to sleep. I don't believe those, but that's widely talked about. As far as getting around the house, that's a very difficult thing to explain. I don't have much trouble with the children.
Hmm.
The children sleep the sleep of the just. I mean, they don't have any responsibilities. When you're a 10-year-old, you don't have to worry about the furnace. If it doesn't sound right, the parents are supposed to hear that and worry about it. Or if there's a noise in the house, they hear about it. So I think that the children were probably sound asleep. And my daughter, when she was that age, there's been all kinds of noises. One time we had a storm, and I reached over her bed and lowered, pulled out a broomstick, and that's state law in Iowa. If the uh, window weights break and fall down in the window, you got to put a
Broomstick.
broomstick under.
Yep.
But that thing was wide open, and I pulled that out, and it's also part of that law that you got to drop the window by mistake. And it came down and hit. I swear, I felt the house vibrate. It hit so loud, and how it didn't break the window, I don't know. She never moved,
Never moved.
never. And I think children sleep like that.
Hmm.
They may be restless sleepers,
Makes
but
sense.
once they get to sleep, and this had been a big
Yeah.
day in their life. This
Yes.
was Children's Day service. They were up until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. They got home. They had milk and cookies, after getting home after 10 probably. And so they go to bed at 11 o'clock. By midnight, they're sound asleep. It doesn't explain the parents, but the children, I think, were not awake. Some people, I talked to the county attorney, a man named Winterstrand, and he said, I've tried to climb that stairs every way possible, up the middle, up each side. I even tried to walk on the finish board that's on the side, not even touch the steps. And he said, it just makes noise. It's noisy stairway. Some people have tried to explain it that the killer rushed upstairs. I mean, he went up the stairs at a run, and literally when he gets into that room, he's about 4 steps from the victim's head, boom, 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 bang, bang, and they're dead.
That's right at the end of the step. As you walk up, you're walking right into Joe and Sarah's room.
That's right. Mm-hmm. I would be sitting about a foot from the step if I were where I'm sitting right now. Mm-hmm. But I wondered about that. Now this is pure speculation. I have no basis for defending it. It's just what we all do is think about it. It's possible that he didn't run up the steps, but instead he might have come up the steps just reasonably quietly. And he's got the axe in one hand and the lamp in the other. He probably would put the lamp up on the floor.
Banister? Yeah. Oh, the floor. Yeah.
On the floor. Yeah. He would put it there and keep coming up the stairs. Now, maybe that wouldn't awaken the parents, but maybe they were awake. Maybe they did hear him. Mm-hmm. But if you wake up at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have to go to work at 7:30. You've got 2 visiting children downstairs, dark house, and you hear slight footfalls on the steps. You're not going to say, I wonder if that's an axe murderer coming up the stairs. Mm-hmm. You're going to say, oh, one of these kids can't sleep, and they're coming up for comfort. Mm-hmm. Maybe if I lie still, don't look, turn my head away, they think I'm asleep, maybe they won't wake me up. And then they'll be reassured by seeing everything's okay and go back to bed. And so even though they heard him coming, they lay in wait. I mean, mm-hmm. in the hopes that they just made a mistake. It was an axe murderer coming up the stairs. Mm-hmm. But now that things like that, once you crank them out, then you get the feeling, oh, well, that sounds pretty good. I like that.
Yeah. But
you have to be careful with those kinds of explanations. There's I can't think of any way to check that.
Right,
but
right.
That question is often done. The closet killer.
That's a big one.
Yeah,
it's a big one.
That is, and I've got the origin of that. Mm-hmm. Very precise origin, and also a rebuttal of that. That idea started out from Minnie Moore. Minnie Moore was a sister of the murdered man. She worked in Omaha. She got there later in the day after the murder, and later in the week, I don't know if it was Tuesday or Wednesday. Funeral was on Wednesday, and I don't believe she would be there for that too. But it's that first part of the murder week. She and a friend speculated, like we're doing and like everyone else is doing when they get involved in the case. And she thought maybe the killer had hidden in the closet. And then all he'd have to do would be to come out, and he's right beside Joe and Sarah, just a few steps, and you don't have the problem of the squeaky stairs and so on. It does eliminate a lot of problems.
Right.
And a reporter picked that up. A reporter named Hoban, Hoban. Mm-hmm. He was a reporter for the Kansas City Post, not the Star. The Star is the big newspaper in Kansas City, was then too. The Post was a spinoff of the Denver Post. and it was an equivalent of the National Enquirer. It had lots of articles about, now we're looking into that attic and closet that's off of the bedrooms in the house. It's cleaned up a little from what it was.
It's got those Amityville windows, chat. Look at that. Look at those windows.
The eyeball windows.
If you have these windows in your home, get them out now.
No, we do not. We do not.
There you go.
Windows, get out.
Yeah, good one, Steve.
Let me see. I lost my train of thought. I want to get.
You're talking about the closet, honey.
Yeah, the Hoban wrote an article saying that the killer hid in the closet. He just made the direct statement, and he knew that because he went in the closet and there was a cardboard box full of cotton ticking. Probably she did some quilting, I suppose, and it was scooped out like this, like someone had been sitting on it. Somebody sat down on it, and he saw, I think he said 2 cigarettes. Sometimes it gets written that it was smoking material. But someone said 2 cigarettes, but cigarettes were not popular at that time, but they had them, and it could easily be. Well, the problem with that is that the doctors all looked in those closets. They looked the whole house over. None of them in any of their testimony mentions the idea of the killer hiding in the closet. And one of the undertakers had read the story. And so he went in the closet purposely to check it, to see about it. And he found the box. And it's true, it was sitting like this. It was scooped out. But he said it was sitting on 2 suit boxes, empty suit boxes. And if you know what a suit box is, it's 5-6 inches high. It's a very thin cardboard. It would be impossible for a person to sit on that top box and not crush those suit boxes flat. That's one thing. And he said, I looked the entire closet over. Hoban also mentioned there was a heel print in the closet. He said, I looked the entire closet over and I couldn't find a heel print and I couldn't find any evidence of tobacco or smoking in that closet. The detective Wilkerson, who came to town and pushed the case against F.F. Jones, he was that was part of his case. He folded that in, and he thought there were 3 killers, only one of which swung an axe, but the other 2 were kind of backups just in case, and they were all hiding in the closets. But I have very serious. I would rather think that Hoban had a deadline, and he wanted something that nobody else had, and he got it from the sister. She speculated that maybe they hid in the closets, and he spun that off, and he found that and threw in a couple of cigarettes for good measure, and wrote his story.
And so much of a story is born. And now you have, like you and I have discussed, so many paranormal groups going in there and they're focusing on the closet and they're getting readings in the closet. And they're getting this in the closet.
That's right.
But like we say all the time, Steve and I in our chat and everything else, the whole thing is you can almost materialize this kind of stuff, especially when you're focused on it. So anybody that's going in there or thinking, going in an investigation, this is a must listen to, because you're really going to get the facts. And that way, when you go back and you're getting something else or you're feeling something else, it's not quite right. And you can focus better on it's funny how paranormal investigation is very much like criminology and historian and everything all mixed together, and it all works because facts are facts, and facts don't care about your feelings or your thoughts or it's just going to be the way it is, right, Steve?
And
You know,
indeed.
the
Amen.
closet's a big one. Again, how everybody was hit is a big one. Um, did you have another one, Ed, that you want to finish
Yeah.
up? But you have plenty of time. Take all the time you want.
Um, Another rumor that was widely believed for about 2 days. Des Moines Register reporter wrote an article. Edgar Markham became a famous reporter in Des Moines Register. He was a young, almost a cub reporter at the time. But he wrote an article about finding burned papers in the kitchen stove.
Mm.
And there was a flurry of excitement. Maybe this was a crime, maybe these were legal documents, and there's some reason that they were trying to conceal it. But that just fizzled out. I mean, none of the people who actually looked at the kitchen stove found any burned papers in it. You know,
They're just making it up.
I think he did. I mean, the you had the excitement of the first day, of course, but from then on, nothing much happened in some ways. You know, there were all kinds of attempts, but nothing got solved, and they were looking desperately. You had something like 20 reporters who came to town. Some of them got there Monday, some got there Tuesday, and they talked among themselves and things. And all of them, had to send out a teletype or a phone call within the next 2 hours, and you got to have something. You got to write some kind of copy, and
right.
So that was an example. Another one there's a knothole killer in the back in the barn. There was a knothole, and there was hay. It's in the hay mound up above, and there was a depression. And some people have talked about the killer casing the house, getting there and lying and watching who comes in through that knothole there. I don't have a way to disprove that, but I'm very suspect of it. For one thing, it's hard for a stranger, if it was a stranger, to come into a town. If he came in, he'd have to come in on the railroad, and that's about 6, 7, 8 blocks from the railroad. It's not right beside the railroad by any means. So there's a lot of people, a lot of eyes on the street in a little town, and they all know who's stranger, who's not. And an event like this happens, they're all going to remember it. I saw some guy walking up. I don't think the killer got there until that night. I mean, I don't think, personally, I don't feel that he did. And you've also got 3 boys in that group. And 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 10-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old, whatever. They, I would have it'd be an easier explanation for me that in their games, they're up there, lie down and look through the knot and watch what's going on in the neighborhood or their house. And I would have a more innocent explanation for that personally. No. Another one that makes me wonder is the half-eaten meal.
Okay.
There's
I haven't heard a lot about, so I'm interested in this.
They many people today believe, many Villisca people believe, that they found a plate of partially eaten food on the kitchen table, and they assumed that the killer ate that after the murder, I suppose. And again, Wilkerson played that up quite a bit, thought that was significant. But I can't find any of those people first on the scene who mentioned that. And I think that would be an outstanding thing. If I came in and I was looking what's going on, well, look at this. Here's a whole plate of meat and potatoes.
Yep.
And it looks like they ate about half of it and left. Wilkerson tried to claim that it was someone there and the killer came in and that person fled and left the meal. He didn't follow that all the way through. Wilkerson was there for 4 years, off and on, and that was one of his early theories. I rather think it was a corruption of the fact that they had milk and cookies before they went to bed. That was talked about. That apparently there were probably dishes and cookie crumbs and half glass of milk and things like that. And that would be natural. The kids come home from the service are all excited. Well, let's have a snack. Let's have a cookie and some milk before we go to bed. And they just left the dishes. We'll do the dishes tomorrow. And then these people going through the house, some of them, so look, they got the. Do you think the killer did that? Look at those dishes and things. And now I'm speculating, but I've never. I don't give very much credence to things that the doctors and the police did not see themselves when they went through the house.
Well, the thing is you don't have a lot of solid evidence to go on. You've got people tramping through the house. You spoke to witnesses, said anywhere from hundreds to, dozens to hundreds to whatever, people going in and out, tramping through. The same happened in the Lizzie Borden and many of these other cases that we've looked into. I don't understand. I do. The people that, the looky-loos, the people that can't look away from a train wreck, I get that. But if you're thinking of this as the town, you were just celebrating with these kids. We have a hard time realizing that people just wouldn't police their own morals to stay back, to stay out of it. Don't, you're hindering, nobody is thinking that. The whole town is basically moving like a mob, like one mass. They're hanging out in the front. They're following what happens the next day, and we'll get into that all tomorrow. But they're just following like mob rules. Mob rules.
Yeah. Let me go back to the bacon.
Please.
You remember I said that there was a 4-pound piece of slab bacon left in the room. That's an interesting element.
Brace yourself, gatekeepers.
Completely unexplained. This is a posed picture here.
Right.
The movie people did that. I think they wrapped up a piece of bacon and photographed it. But that's not the bacon nor the wrapping. But it's the idea. It's about the right size.
Right. And it was 4 pounds. Was it not 4 pounds?
Well, yeah, that was an estimate.
Okay.
Yeah. It was sitting about where that lamp is sitting, if that's the wall of the Stillinger girls downstairs. Some speculation was that it was a tramp, and that was his kit. He came in with bacon that he would slice off some and cook it and eat with it. I don't think that's true because the Hank Horton, the town marshal, he found a slab of bacon in their pantry off their kitchen, and he thought it had been cut from that. And that's probably the logical place that it would have been. It was not, he didn't try to fit them together. It's an example that, they don't think of really analyzing things. You could have put the two together, and was it cut from there? Did it fit the cut, and so on?
And they never even bothered. They didn't think of it.
No, they just assumed it because there was already bacon, and it wasn't a full slab. Something had been cut from it. But they had no idea at the time, no one, the police, private individuals, why the killer would have taken a piece of bacon and put it out there. The explanations are rampant now, lots of different explanations. One was that it was a gift for the Stillinger girls to take home to their family, their mother, that the mother had cut off a thing, wrapped it up, and left it in their room. So when they packed in the morning, they would take it with them.
Possible.
That's a possible explanation, I suppose. Others that it was a tramp, but he was adding to his kit. He found the bacon as he wandered around the house and liked bacon and cut off some and going to take it with him. Those are conventional explanations. In 1917, when the Iowa Attorney General was preparing the case against the minister, Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly, as the only person who's been tried for the murder. He was acquitted. Um, he put a description of Kelly's behavior and nature that they knew, for Kelly's personality, and a description of the scene. And he mailed that to a fellow in Oregon named Thacker, George Thacker. And George, at that time in 1917, was I don't know whether he was a president. I think he was the president of the Oregon Prisoner Aid Society, which was a private organization in Oregon that would help integrate people back into society when they had been released from prison or got off of parole. Help them find housing, help them find a job, that kind of thing. And he must have had a reputation as a forensic specialist or a criminologist of some kind, because the Iowa Attorney General sent that packet of material with a letter saying, would you compare this person to this scene and draw conclusions and send it back. He didn't give it a lot of time, I don't think. It's just a one-page letter handwritten about this big. I mean, he scribbled off 10, 15 lines. But he talked about Kelly a little bit. And then he said the key factor is the bacon. Mm-hmm. Kelly is a voyeur, a window peeker. He is not, he wouldn't do a direct sexual attack, but he's visual in his orientation. And the bacon was a artificial vagina that he used to masturbate when he looked at the girl. I get all kinds of reactions to this from one terrible experience in Council Bluffs. I told
in the library.
This was at another institution, but there was a young woman who was probably more naive than I am, but she didn't understand what I was saying.
Oh, bless her heart.
I felt sorry, and so she wanted more information, and 2 or 3 times she kept pushing for more information. But anyway,
my gosh.
I've had others. I've talked to people who have some criminology background, and some have said, Eureka, that explains it. And I've had others who said, oh, that's silly. There's nothing to that. Mm-hmm. I'm not in a position to make much of a judgment about that. I have done a little looking. Arthur Kessler, in his book Darkness at Noon, talks about in the Russian gulags that the prisoners would use bread or meat if they could get it as a substitute. And
Glenn here is saying actually liver was a big thing too back then.
Yeah,
right, Steve? It's crazy.
I've heard that. So anyway, I don't think it was just a hobo's kit or anything like that. What reason he did that seems to me to be as good an explanation as I've ever heard. But I don't know if
it also fits that pattern. It fits the pattern, possible pattern. You know, we often try not to make evidence fit the narrative we want to say. We just go the way the evidence takes us. And the way he, whoever this was, danced around, the axe hitting the top of the ceiling, the plaster falling on top, that he'd already been done. He was now dancing whatever celebratory thing he was doing. He spent time in this house. He didn't hurry.
That's clearly true. Had to.
It fits whether it was Kelly or not. We kind of tend to be able to dig on Kelly a little bit more because we have more information about him, and
Yeah.
for sure we will cover a lot of that tomorrow night. But you'll see, chat, as we get moved through this, how that no matter what we learn later, it just seems to reinforce this thought of an obvious psychotic person methodically going through this house. Methodically is a key word there because that's a very psychotic kind of shutdown. You're just on mission and you got blinders on. Listening to whatever voice or whatever may be propelling them or thought or mission, and just cleaning out.
Yeah.
And there's so many, Ed, before I let you go, I mean, God bless you for giving us this time tonight. It has been such an absolute honor to speak with you. And I know the chat feels the same way, and Steve as well. I hate to even ask you another question, but I want to place in people's heads while they're thinking tonight that as heinous as this crime is, it is not as rare as we think as far as axe murders being of opportunity, the axe always being prominent in front of people's houses by their woodpile. In Joe Moore's case, it was used for coal because it was kind of a broken, dull axe, and his brother said he used that for coal. They were always in the front yard. We know of others that have used weapons of opportunity, but I want you to think back of the other episodes we've done with the axe murders from New Orleans and the man from the train. We talked to Mr. James. Again, this all connects in, but think of that after you've learned all the facts of this, and don't try to make anything fit. Just let's follow the trail where it leads us. Steve, what would you like to say about this wonderful evening? This is your first time hearing about this. You're muted, baby. You're muted. No, it's nothing on your beard. You're just there. You go.
Something in my beard. No,
This
I
is your
was
first
gonna
time
be
hearing.
hearing a lot of this, and one of the things that fascinates me, and it's a weird thing, but is the mirror. Like I said, we were talking about the Smokies. My grandmother was born in the Cades Cove area of the Smokies.
Oh my!
She was very, very superstitious. You ever been to Cades Cove? Been around the loop up there? That's beautiful up there. Well, one of those cemeteries by the old church, my relatives are buried in there.
Really?
Sparks is the name on the grave. But they believed that you had to cover the mirror when somebody died because their spirit could get trapped in the mirror. Now, I've never heard
I've heard that.
any further than on that side of the family. And I've heard that it was done out of respect, especially if they had the viewing in the home, because that's where the bodies used to be laid out. The parlor in the front of your house is where the...
Uh-oh. He might have froze just a sec.
Yeah, something happened.
Yeah, he just froze. He's frozen in time. He'll come back.
Yep. Okay. Well,
he's probably got a storm over there. Sometimes he'll pop out, come back in again, and I've got a storm here. But
we've had really high winds, and we were getting. I wondered if this was going to work because we had some winds that were causing a little bit of, I think, shorting out and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, we'll just take it on the chin. This is live. Like they used to say back in the I Love this live TV.
I think he's back.
You're back. Okay, go ahead, honey. You're unfrozen.
I was talking about the mirror, something they would cover the mirror to keep the dead person's spirit from going in there. And then also back when the bodies were laid out at home, they were in the parlor. And then later they opened funeral parlors, which was a parlors for that specific purpose. And that's when the sitting room started being called the living room. It was no longer a parlor for the dead. But it was also customary in those cases. It was considered bad luck if you were to look at a mirror and see the body. That can bring bad luck on you. My grandmother had a head full of those old superstitions.
Oh, yes, yes.
Or the fact that I think maybe he didn't want to see himself doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
But then again, if it's the voyeur, why would he not want to watch himself? Or maybe he just liked to watch others. I don't know. Yeah, there's so many different ways. Just one little thing like that. Yeah. That mirror, you can take it and go, as Charles Fort once wrote, one measures a circle beginning anywhere. And I think that's the way this is. No, you'll end up in the same place, and you probably got more questions than answers. Definitely more questions.
That's probably right. It just one closing statement of Tomorrow I'll try. I'll try to move a little faster. I
Oh, you did
apologize
fine. No. This has
um,
been lovely. Don't you change a thing.
but I think that when we look at the serial killer theory,
Hmm.
that you will find that many of the people will believe that and think, well, that's it. But then when we look later tomorrow at the Kelly, they'll
Hmm.
think, well, maybe it was Kelly.
Exactly.
Oh, where do you hear his confession?
I know. Wait till you hear it, guys. Wait till you hear it. I know. I hate to say it like this because, again, with most respect to the victims, especially the children and everybody affected in the town, that is something that I've found studying Ed's work and looking at, again, watch the movie. I think I've watched the movie 5 times now. Each time I've watched it, I've got something else from it, watching inflections and the way people speak and, the different things that affected this town. It's absolutely it's one of those rare cases. I don't know of another case. You could say like the Lizzie Borden or whatever, but nobody has really gone. Now we're going back and rehashing and going through historical documents and trying to gain the truth. Whereas Ed's gone through decade by decade by decade and spoken to people as they've come up through. And it's such a rare chance to have to do this and to really pick apart this case and try to see, because it's going to help you discern things in your life today. It's going to help work that brain muscle. It's just like doing crosswords and doing other things that keep you sharp. So tonight we have barely scratched the surface. We have done the crime, what basically walked you back through that in June 10th in Villisca. And I can't believe your anniversary is June 10th, Ed.
Yes, it is. I said when my wife, of course, set the wedding date, and
Amazing.
She didn't yet know. Well, she knew a little bit about it, but she wasn't aware that it was a fanatical thing. And I told her, well, one thing you can be assured, I'll never forget our anniversary.
Yep. Isn't that funny? Wow. How about that?
That was just coincidental.
It's just absolutely amazing. And like Steve said, the mirror, I think when you put all that stuff together, we obviously have a very sick, broken individual who was probably abused as a child, and is some kind of mover. He doesn't stay in one place very long. Ed's going to tell you about some patterns of some other, some axe murders around. We've gone over quite a few. It's not that far from the train, but then again, people walk like crazy. So, don't get bogged down in those kind of details too much until you've heard it all. And then we're going to come back next week and we're going to have a beautiful Q&A where we really unpack a lot of this. And, and we're looking forward to tomorrow night, Ed. And if you want another night, I'll give it to you. I'll give you whatever you want.
Let's see how we get along tomorrow night.
Great.
I think I will start with the serial killer theory.
Okay.
And try to show what I have studied in serial killing. I don't know as much about those as I do about Villisca, of course, the ones that are used. And I both met and know quite a bit about the man from the train, which is the leading proponent of that theory now, although it's been around. That was the theory that was first proposed by the authorities. The first 2-3 weeks, they were pretty confident that's what it was. And then I'd like to jump to Kelly and look at that theory.
Exactly.
And then sitting in the middle is this whole case against F.F. Jones, which has all kinds of interesting elements, but to me is not as important as the others in terms of understanding the motivation of the murder and the crime, things like that. But I don't want to neglect that entirely. So we'll just keep going. And
I'm having a blast, Ed. This is like Christmas.
See where we are at the end of tomorrow.
Absolutely. This has been absolutely fantastic, Steve. We're gonna say goodnight to him tonight, and we'll see him tomorrow night for the second half. And boy, if you think you've heard stuff now, you just wait till tomorrow night.
Same bat time, same bat channel. Be here.
Ed, please go have a wonderful, blessed evening. Thank you so much for being here. You're a freight train, my love.
The pleasure.
Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely an inspiration to everybody here. And we thank you so much for your time.
Well, I'm glad to do it. It's fun for me. I enjoy it. It's been a lifetime hobby, and now I'm getting a chance to, and it's important too.
It is. It is important.
Sometime before we leave, one of these days, I'll read the dedication of the book.
Oh, that will be fantastic.
Which is only a paragraph long, but it deals with a little bit of this thing that we don't want to forget the victims, and
right.
I try to say something about that. But anyway,
Absolutely.
I've enjoyed it. We'll see you tomorrow night.
We thank you. You be blessed, honey. See you tomorrow night. Same bat channel, same bat time. Okay. And I'll send you another link tomorrow in your email.
That'll be fine.
Thank you so much. Have a blessed evening, love.
Thanks everybody in the chat.
Okay.
Wow, that was
guys.
Great. It's just getting started. It's just getting wound up.
He's just getting started. And the hardest thing, I think I need to run around the room about 10 times because my adrenaline is just, because here's the thing. I respect this man so much as a person. You know, first I got to know him through the book, through the, through the work, through the blog, just trying to go in and understand some things. He's going to talk about a theory tomorrow night that I'm 100% right along with him. And we spent an hour, maybe 2 hours on the phone talking, and we were just like right in sync, and I'm like, tell me more.
Taking notes here the whole time on my phone. I've got some questions. One I really, really want to know about is about the closet, and I won't say what the question is yet.
Okay.
But I've got a question based on knowledge of houses from around that time.
Isn't he wonderful, Lindsay? Yeah, I mean, I do too. One of my major ones was I wanted to know where the plaster was because I was never finding it in anything. The plaster was on top of the bed. So again, at this point, I'm not going to tell you completely, but you can kind of see by my comments where I'm going with a lot of this because I want to know the forensics of it. And it's so rare that we have them. And I'm right with Ed on this whole thing about if the doctors and the first people that went through, and again, who was the first guy going through there? Ross Moore. Then he couldn't take anymore. He left. Then he sent in Horton. Horton came out and said, my God, there's somebody dead in every bed. And I mean, just imagine this in this small town. It rocked everything. And as I was describing, the whole town seemed to move in a mass, like the town had become one entity together and just flowing like a school of fish. Everybody's on the porch, then they're back across the street, and then the next thing happens, they're back over here. And it's just horrific. I mean, the way he's going to explain tomorrow night, I don't want to spoil any of it, but what is your next move after that? As a father, as a mother in a home in that town, nobody's caught. How do you go to bed that night? How do you sleep?
I wonder if he slept there in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And then we haven't gotten to the getaway yet. How did he get away?
Yeah, you don't even know.
Did he spend all the next day there until the cover of darkness again and then slip away? There's so many questions and so many ways you can go with everything.
I'm glad he talked about the barn. I've got a couple of questions about Peckham because Mary Peckham, she was the first one there in the morning hanging the laundry, remember? And she was the one who called Ross Moore. It was also amazing to people to understand that a lot of these people had phones back then. And so if you're thinking back, if you ever saw old Walnut Grove, and what was that old biddy's name that was always listening in because it was in the general store? She was the rumor monger. And I don't know if he was in the crowd. Glenn could have been.
Mrs. Olson, I think.
Mrs. Olson, thank you.
Nellie Olson's mother.
And she always stayed on the phone and got all the information back. That's what they had there in this town. So we've got more coming from that. We've got the whole, there was a couple of trials involved. We'll go through all of that. We'll go through the suspects. And then, I honestly think we need another, if he's willing to do another night, and then we could do the Q&A on Monday, and then Steve and I can come back and do another one. I'll
Yeah.
do whatever
We're
Ed is
probably going
willing
to do
to do.
something on 13 with this too, if Cisco
Mhm.
still wants to. Just
Absolutely.
do one night over there, maybe just a recap or
Right.
something like
I
that.
think that would be wonderful, like a recap right before the Q&A. Susan Woodcarver, thank you so much for your extra efforts, love, for getting all the questions down. Again, as I knew, a lot of the questions that were coming in at first are probably getting answered along the way, and they shift and change because you're getting deeper into the case. And that's why we went through the details of the crime, not to exploit the victims in any way. Ed has never been that way. Neither are we. We handled the Amityville as best we could. We're not showing crime photos all over the place. I don't have, but the thing that makes me angry is when people get it wrong out of, it doesn't, I don't mind when people get it wrong out of, innocence or a not understanding or not knowing, but it's when they're lazy and they just repeat something that isn't even remotely a fact. It really, I think, does a disservice to the victims. I myself cannot, from the beginning of this case to right now, the mother. And again, in the paranormal, a lot of people say that they speak to her, or I know a couple cases, and we will bring this up when Steve and I do the paranormal, of course. But they keep telling me that they're talking to her, and she's going next door, and she's trying to stop the people there, back and forth. And I'm thinking, this poor mom, and if you understand the paranormal, if you understand the that we're all of one spirit, I can't imagine somebody going in there and not trying to help these people if they are stuck in there, and why they keep getting called back if they're not stuck. So we need to talk about that. We need to sort that mess as well, because if I am going to leave something for, I hate to say posterity, but to leave something in my wake, I want the truth to be told. And as a mom myself, I cannot imagine the horror of being stuck on the other side, not being able to get out. If you have one child that's stuck, it's the same thing as in the orphanage. In my mind, a very similar case to the orphanage in Gettysburg, and I know Steve knows what I'm talking about. So we will get
Thanks, D Rock,
so
for
much
the
D Rock.
super chat there.
Thank you to everybody who gave super chats tonight. I was trying to find a way. If somebody knows how to do this, Steve, maybe you can help me. On the Q&A night, I would like to donate anything to Ed Epperly. And,
I sure have
if we can try to work something like that out for that night, because he has given so much and he gets nothing for this. All he gets is, whatever the cost
He was
gets
even
out
going
of
to
the
send
book.
me his book free, but I'm going to at least trade him some books, and I may stick a few bucks inside
He's
him.
very interested in, Tennessee and where you're from, and he could probably talk to you for
He's
hours
been
about
around
that.
Cades
So,
Cove. He saw where my grandmother was born. So
yeah, if you have anything like that, he would absolutely love it. And again, special thank yous to Dr. Ed Epperly, of course, for his research. The Rundles, who kind of got him to finish the book so they could use it as a companion piece to the movie. The movie, again, is just put it in villiscamovie.com. There's a place there where you want to watch it on demand. It's like $5. Lindsay, thank you, because Lindsay gave me a PayPal, and I used that to watch the movie. So when I tell you guys, I put it right back in the show. I put it right back in the show. So thank you so much for that. Also, thanks to, of course, Pixabay, Giphy.com, VidEasy, and YouTube Audio Library for our wonderful music tonight. Kevin MacLeod, Five Armies was most of the music that you heard through, and it was marked through on the other videos. Steve, wow, right? I mean,
that's quite the ride, and we're still climbing the hill on that roller coaster.
We're up there, and I told him he could take as much time as he wants. You go. I was hoping we get an hour, but like Eric at a Most Notorious, I've got to pay homage to Eric at Most Notorious. It's a wonderful podcast. It's all audio, so if you listen on YouTube, you're just going to get the episode art. But he did a 3-part with Ed, and absolutely phenomenal. But they did it on the phone, and he pushed the button thinking he was going to get an hour, like like I had said in the beginning, and the man went for almost 6 hours.
Jeez.
So Ed had to cut it up into four different parts, And he told me on the phone today that the thing he's looking most forward to is the Q&A and getting to talk to y'all and having those questions come through. So that night will be a very much more of an interactive. I didn't want to keep throwing questions at him because what happens is he has to focus on the screen and he loses his thought. And I just wanted to let him go. So fabulous episode, Steve. I've been excited about this for so long.
Yeah,
You and I
that's
have
all you
talked.
talked about. I love it.
Oh my gosh. And we've got so much more to go. So I'm going to let Steve and Sandy be the ones to pull the string on whether or not we do another show in between. I know if we do it, you guys are going to be there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And hello to everybody
We'll
in
talk
here.
about that. There's a couple of options on how we can run it, but yeah, we'll do it. I don't have any problem with that.
Right. So thanks for everybody that's in here tonight, everybody that threw out their ideas and, all of this wonderful, just back and forth and using your brains to help us sort this. Like I said, I've got an idea, and it's a wacky one, but in this wacky world we're in, isn't the wacky becoming more plausible every day, isn't it?
Yeah. No
Okay,
sense
Steve,
makes sense.
where can we find you, my love?
I'm right here.
You're right
I'm
there.
on Among the Missing. Steve Stockton's Among the Missing. The easiest way to get there is atmyt.com. I've also got can I drop my link tree in here?
You go right ahead. You drop whatever you want there.
This is, you can look at it on your phone. You can look at it on your computer, and it's got everything that I have going right now. There's 5 YouTube channels. My book's on Amazon, and I've opened an Etsy store where you can buy my books signed. And the reason I did it through Etsy, that way I can keep up with the orders. I can print the labels right from Etsy, and it's the easiest way to get everybody's books out efficiently and on time. There's my link tree, and let me give you the
awesome.
Give me the Etsy link. I think it's in the link tree, but
that's what you needed. That's great.
Yeah, I love that link tree, and you can subscribe to it. It doesn't cost you anything, and whenever I update, add a new link. Oops, that's not it. Sorry. Way to go, Steve. I'm tired. I've been up since 1:30.
God bless you. Yep, and don't let it. We are making bacon great again. The first when I heard about bacon, I said, "My cats will lose their absolute
be sure
mind."
to check your bacon. Look carefully at your bacon.
I said, "Uh-oh." I said, "Well, we're not gonna let him. We're bringing making bacon great again, and we're gonna make it. It means love. It still means love here." Okay, well, that's how we turn the dark into light.
I can't see the keyboard. Doggone it.
You got 12 past midnight.
Yeah, I know. I deleted it.
12 pounds. Okay. You're going backwards. You had the right number here this time.
I'm a number short from my own channel.
You lost the number. Yeah. Okay, hold on.
Here we go. I got it.
What if we just put up your link tree? That should.
Yeah, it's on the link tree, or if you just want to go look at the books. And also over there, in addition to signed copies of my books, I'm opening up my vintage paranormal and ghost book library, supernatural, occult stuff. I've probably got 100 books sitting over here that I'm going to list on.
Wow.
Etsy. There's only a couple up there now, but I've got some rare and out of print stuff, some vintage stuff from the way back.
There you go.
Have a look.
There you go. Have a look. Now, again, on these pictures, I don't know if Ed's going to get a chance to tell you about it, but this guy here, you see a photo by Churchill. Churchill was a local photographer and came in, and a lot of these pictures we have because of him. And at the very base here, it just reminds me so much of, the old... what do you call Civil War photos and stuff like that, where you saw a lot of the artists and stuff. It's just amazing. Here's the town. This is a little bit further on. Of course, we've got a lot of photos through here, but it's just amazing. I mean, the people involved, the axe, a lot of people would think, why would you ever want the axe? Well, the thing is he thought, and he was talking to the young man that went and picked it up, like he said. And he said, if we don't, that's going to wind up in a dump. We
Yeah,
have
if
nothing.
that old lady had passed away with that in the attic,
Right.
people probably wouldn't have known what it was. What's this doing in the attic? Here, take this home and we'll do
Yeah,
something with it. But
exactly.
that is cool that it's and I
They
got to
saved
tell
it.
you something about that later, Cisco, about the axe. But
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
one of
There's
those
the
things.
movie again. There's the book. Please get the book. Again, this is what Ed, he's, of course, retired from Luther College, professor of education. And this is his thing. But, he told me in confidence and, just between us, he said that the real payment is when people listen. They're amazed. He can tell that they're thinking about the case. They're muddling through the facts, and they come and they tell him what they think, and it sparks the next thing. And he says it feels like he said a lot of people retire, go fishing or fish all their life. Because I've been fishing for facts. And I said, well, the funny thing is you're going to be with Steve and I, and we've been fishing for facts in the paranormal and true crime and mystery for all our lives, so we know exactly how you feel. So he was among the right people tonight, I think, Steve. And I can't thank you
Definitely.
enough for being here with us. I know you're so busy, and you've just been doing shows left and right and
I'm all over
exhausted.
the place. Been doing and
We're
all
so
those
happy.
videos on ATM. Sandy wrote the words, but I'm doing the audio recording,
Hmm.
audio editing, the video editing, and then putting it all together, scheduling it, and getting it out there. And I've been doing a pretty good pace, about a video a day, but I'm going to take a break. Got a new video coming out tomorrow. Watch and see.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, my friend, I guess we got to leave them with some laughs. So how about a little skeleton death fairy on the way out, so you guys can laugh, and that way we're leaving you in the light tonight. I know it was a heavy subject. I'm sorry we lost Ted. He just didn't want to hear about the kids, and I don't
Yeah.
blame him. I don't blame him at all. Maybe he'll be back tomorrow night for most of the court case stuff, and all the different things that happen in the town. It's very interesting, and it's absolutely riveting as far as I'm concerned. And I'm learning so much, and I'm so glad to be here with you guys. So, good night, Steve. I love you, my friend. Good to
Night.
see you
Love you too,
smiling.
Cisco.
You're
Good to
looking
see everybody.
gorgeous,
It's all
more
you.
gorgeous every day.
Well, you can thank Midnight Society for that. She's taking good care of me. She
There you go.
picks out my wardrobe. She's the one that recommended the haircut and the beard trim.
I
I
love it.
like it.
I
I've
like
had
it
like
too.
3 haircuts in my life ever that I liked, and this is number 4.
I like it. I saw it right
So
away, and I really enjoy, right from the get. Thank
yeah,
you so much to all the
so
wonderful mods.
get
Thank
ready
you
for that
for,
internet waiting.
moderate, yeah, and moderating that chat. I appreciate you so much. I realize it's extra work with, these next couple shows coming up, but I couldn't do it without you, and been so excited to show you all this. And it's just an amazing thing, and it's something about our history, and it's more common than you think. I mean, look at all the ones we've talked about. We're going to talk about even more. So I would highly suggest, if you have an axe and a wood pile out in your front yard, go get that sumbitch right now and bring it inside and lock your doors. Okay. Because check your closets, under the bed, whatever. But, why not? I mean, you get the sage and do it all at once. Just dispel everything out. You're living in the dead. Get them all out of there. I love you all so much. Here's a little skeleton death fairy on the way out. See you tomorrow night. Same bat time, same bat channel. Keep your feet under the covers and closet doors shut, because there are things that go bump in the night. You bet.
Good
Good
night,
night,
everybody.
everybody. I think. Maybe good night. Maybe. And here we go. Good night.